Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello, thanks for joining me. Really looking forward to today's conversation with Niel Cope. Niel is the founder and CEO of an amazing business in the UK, People Matters HR. And People Matters is not some fly-by-night operation. They have been around for a long time. In fact, started in 2011. You know, we've heard those statistics about 1 in 5 businesses survive the first 5 years. Well, Niel's done that and much more, and is in fact expanding and developing the business in some really interesting ways. But before we get into all that, Niel, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Nice to have asked me.
Yeah, really great to have you. So just for people listening, you are based in Manchester, is that right? But you cover, I think, the north.
Predominantly the north of England. We've got 1 or 2 outliers in the south. We're probably growing organically in that direction, but our vision was always to be the premier HR company in the north. That's the mission.
And you are into longevity. I think you celebrated your 30th year wedding anniversary last year, is that right?
Did, yeah. Yeah, coming up to 31 years now.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So yeah, I'm really glad that you've said yes to having this conversation, because you've built a fabulous business and you've done, I guess, what many people would love to do, is that leave the corporate world, become a solo HR consultant, but then grow it into a team. And then I think, as we may cover, you're looking to the future and how the business evolves, and you're doing some really interesting things. Could I ask you to give us an overview to what I've just sort of outlined there?
Yeah, sure. So coming up to 14 years ago, I was HR director for quite a big charity in Manchester, and I just saw a gap in the market through friends really who were running businesses, and realised that they'd not got the kind of infrastructure and HR support to manage the people. And it's something that I've always been passionate about. We manage and develop your people. That's one of our strap lines. So I started helping them out, realised that I could actually do some good, and decided that with 5 kids, the middle of a recession, with a big mortgage and no clients, to go it alone. What could go wrong?
I got to pause you there. I mean, what was the conversation at home at that point?
It was weird. It was something had happened at work, and it had been happening more and more. I kind of went, I'm really not happy in what I'm doing, but I've just had this idea. I'm going to set up an HR business, and I'm going to support smaller businesses and other charities to make sure that they're looking after their people, they're doing all the right things, having the difficult conversations if they need to, but also motivating and developing the guys. And I don't know what it was, because it literally came out of nowhere. I mean, I'd always had the idea that I wanted to work for myself, but a plan just formed. This is what I was going to do, and this is, by leaving the organisation, how I'm going to do it. And bizarrely, none of the people close to me would think and turn around and go, no, this is ridiculous. We've got an 8-month-old baby. Everyone I spoke to went, yeah, that could work. And we just went with it. And I literally went into work on a Monday morning and spoke to my CEO and said, I've got this plan and I'm not going to achieve it here, so why don't we part company? We did. And again, the double whammy was also the 1st of August, which is probably the worst time in the whole of the business calendar to set up a business.
And when you formed that and first stepped out, did you have this very cleanly documented plan that says, I'm going to go for this type of business and they're going to be this size and I'm going to charge them this much per month? Or was it, I'll see what comes?
Absolutely no idea. I was the most naive person in Britain. I remember I went to our professional bodies, the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, CIPD.
The IPD. Yeah.
And I went to one of their, I don't know whether they call it the self-employed group or something like that. And I literally, when they did the intros around the room, I said, I don't know whether I'm an out-of-work HR director or the newest HR consultant in the country, but hey, I sat and I just listened to these guys, and what they were doing was entirely what I didn't want to do. A lot of them, because of where we were in terms of the economy at the time, they were basically going to the south of England, where there was a little bit of money around sort of southeast, doing a piece of work for a reasonable amount of money, coming back home, and then having to reinvent themselves and try and do it again. And my thing's always been, I can't do that. I have this responsibility of the family, the kids. And so literally I had from a 12-year-old to a baby that big at the time. I thought, there's no way I could do that. I don't want to work away from home anyway. That isn't what this is about. So the only idea I had is I wanted it to be a recurring income. And I wanted it to be the way that if I outsourced it myself, what would I want? And what I decided I wanted was some guys that could help me that were the extension of my business, who just didn't necessarily sit in the same building, that were pragmatic, that had a bit of fun, that were a little bit irreverent and would challenge the norm. And that's where it went from. And that's kind of me. When you do the any personality things, I'm quite on at the other end of the extrovert scale. So yeah, it just kind of went from there. And I had a friend who I'd been helping out who owned a couple of cartridge warehouse places that refurbish ink cartridges and delivered them. And I said, look, can I see if my idea to create this framework would work in your business? And he went, yeah, fantastic. And Gary was a source for many of my talks from that point onwards, because by his own admission, he was absolutely rubbish at dealing with people. In the nicest sense, as a mate, he was brilliant, but he'd had none of that training. He had no idea. And that's where it came from, of going, you're a good printer or a good farmer or whatever, and then you suddenly take on employees, and then you suddenly have to figure out what a grievance is or what an employment contract is, or do you do policies, and what happens if someone comes to you and says, I'd like some parental leave? They had no idea. So that's where it was. So I've always had this undercurrent of also educating the clients at the same time as just saying, that's the way of doing it. And we also have a bit of a mantra that we don't act like the incredible no men. We always kind of say, okay, well, what is it you want to achieve? Let's have a look at the best way of doing it. If it's something you can't do, we'll tell you. There's a route to get from A to B, and we'll work with you to do that.
Yeah. So that practical advice. You're so right. The people who start these businesses and then expand out but haven't had that training, there's that gap there. And what about capacity to pay for some of those? Because they've got to start from zero employee headcount, so they don't really need to pay anyone for that.
Yeah, and that was always the challenge. And I think that was the bit for me that took a long time, because I'd actually worked for a long time in the police, and then I'd moved out from the police service into charity. So obviously advertising and pricing and all these things just weren't in my vocabulary at all, because work just came to us. That's what it did. So that was something, and I would say I think that's probably been my biggest struggle until very recently, of how to price things right so that you're not underpricing yourself but not overpricing yourself, and finding that happy balance. I was very lucky when I first started out that there was still money around in terms of grants, not so much for us but for clients. So we were able to go and see people and say, I've got this idea, etc. And they'd be like, yeah, it sounds great, but we can't afford that. And I'd be able to turn and say, what happens if I could get you 50% of that funded? And then the conversation changed. And that lasted a couple of years. It was enough to help us get through the door. And then as things started to change, I think when it would have been probably about 2015, all the growth hub stuff went. And there was suddenly no more money for that sort of thing. So it was a case of, right, well, we can't do this in any kind of deals with it, but we can do it. And by that time, we'd got a track record that people would believe us. But it is still a problem even now. That's why I say that I do a lot of leadership development, and I'm having to try and be a little bit more realistic about the pricing, because I'm doing it for next to nothing, because I'm passionate for doing it. So I've not been pricing it right. And I've realised that I've got to do the right thing by everybody. It's now sort of saying, right, this is what we can do for clients, and these are the things that we need to do for businesses that are growing and have never been able to support the people properly.
And just if I pause there, for people listening to this in other locations, there are often grants that you haven't heard of that potential clients can get. So I know in the States, they do this sometimes by state, and there are some Texas, Florida, some places where they give money for training your staff. But if you don't go looking for it like Niel did, then you don't know about it, so you can't potentially pitch a service to them on a project and then half the cost for them. So that was really smart what you did there.
The occasional, what happens even now is you'll find it exactly as they do when you say state by state. We can have it here, county by county, but also local borough. So, for example, where our office is actually based is a place called Bury, and we're 10 miles north of Manchester. There's things that our borough has got that you can offer to people whose businesses registered in that borough. Let's say the neighbouring borough of Bolton, which is literally 2 miles away from where we are, doesn't have those sorts of packages. It's down to luck. It's down to, we always call it a postcode lottery over here, of whether you can get that. But also what we do find is we did a really great piece of work for a company during lockdown in a place, and it took me a long time to get this one right, in a place called Aspidella Zouch,
Oh, wow.
which sounds really exotic, doesn't it? But it's in the middle of Leicester. And the other side happened. Their HR manager wanted to do some leadership development, but knew she hadn't got the capacity or the experience or the depth of knowledge. So she actually found a pot of money and then found us. So I delivered it for them. And I always think it was a standout piece of work there because, and this isn't blowing our own trumpet too much, but the first session, we were still in the lockdown conditions. So it made it even funnier that I had bubbles. Do you remember the bubbles of people that could only see each other? Well, because it was a family business, we had the CEO was able to sit with his son, who was one of the apprentices. And this business, it had places in the States, Poland, Vietnam. His head office just happened to be in Leicester, and they were a standout thing within their business. They'd won the Queen's Innovation Award. In fact, they won it twice. So we had these little bubbles of the husband and wife who were managers. Then there were two people who worked really closely together. Then on the screen, I'd got two people who were sat upstairs with a piece of perspex in between them, who I never met face-to-face until 3 months later, and some guys in Scotland who were obviously impervious to COVID at the time. But what was great about it is they wanted to soak it up because everybody from the MD across the board had said, yeah, we do these jobs and we lead people and we've got a fantastically successful business, but we don't actually know whether we're doing the right thing. And Stuart Revel, the MD, came just to say hello at the beginning of it and sort of maybe just say, listen to this guy, he knows what he's talking about. And at 10:30, Stuart, who, he won't mind me saying this, sounds like Billy Connolly in his prime, came over and went, yeah, that was great. Can I stay? Of course you can. I just assumed that your diary would be too busy. When I'm going to clear it. And do you mind if I ring my wife, Karen, because she's the other direction. She needs some of this too. And yeah, so we did this. It was a funny one because Leicester at the time were having lots of COVID problems. They were one of those hotspots. And we're in Greater Manchester, we were one. So it was like week by week, can you come or can't you? Yes, it's legal to drive down there. And then we had to go back again. Then it might be another 2 weeks. But yeah, we did that. And then we did some additional stuff for them and some coaching. And it was just an amazing project with some amazing people. And that's kind of where I want to go with it more, without the COVID, obviously.
Yeah. So they had not taken any of your HR services, like the compliance stuff or anything like that. It was completely separate. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And their HR manager, she was great. She was doing all those. And there was absolutely kind of no threat for us to come in and say, we want your business. We were doing a project to support her delivery. And I think that's one of the things that many organisations don't understand, that they can do this. We don't want to take everybody's HR business. We'd love to go in and enhance the offering that they've got. And when we need to, we withdrew, but we were always at the end of the phone. So
yeah, that's so good. I remember when I was an HR consultant, sometimes I would do that extension thing where you'd go with HR compliance, handbooks and policies and stuff, and then you'd train the staff on the policies and procedures so that they would sign off on it. And then you'd say to the management team, well, guess what? When you meet with groups of employees in a small group situation, you'll always get feedback. So now I've got all this amazing feedback about your business. Do you want me to get your leadership group together? And then, yeah, that sounds good. Now I've got all the leaders together. I talk them through that. They talk through what their challenges are, and suddenly you've got the opportunity to do leadership development. So
absolutely, yeah. And we find that in a couple of ways, because I suppose it's the 2 tiers of our business. Well, 3 tiers, I suppose. One is we do retained HR. So we become your HR department, just not actually working with you. But we do provide on-site time as well. So if we need to go, they're not having to think about the money. I've always had that thing of, particularly because I started working with a lot of very small businesses, I didn't want them ever to think, I've got an issue where it might cost me £50 or whatever, so I'll try and deal with it. And the next thing, it's all gone wrong and it's cost them thousands in lawyers' fees and all the rest of it. So we've always done it as saying, never ever worry about picking the phone up because it's within the price. So pick the phone up, talk to one of my guys. We're not a call centre. These are the people you're going to meet. And we have a big thing about making sure everybody meets us face to face and has that personal touch. And latterly, we started building on-site time for the same reason. So if you've got a manager who may have never done an absence meeting or a disciplinary meeting or anything like that, we can say, look, we'll come in, we'll help you because we'll teach you what to do at the same time. We won't undermine you as a manager because you're their boss. We might be behind you, pulling the strings like a marionette or puppetry or whatever. But at the end of the day, they'll go out, they'll leave with the respect for you that they should have, rather than if we take over, they'll be looking at us thinking, well, they're the guys that know what they're talking about rather than my manager. So it's kind of a constant sort of development process. So that's the retained stuff. And it's all things you just said then. We'll do handbooks and we'll do policies and we set them up with a great little HRIS system and all these. And we do all their letters again, because I don't like the idea of them trying to do a letter and saying, is this okay? I'd rather say, look, you're busy running your business. There's your letter. Are you happy to sign that off? Yeah, right. Cool. We'll then email it out. The second one is where we do piece of consultancy. So we'll actually go in, as you've just said, and say, what systems have you got? What processes have you got? Let's have a talk to your people. Now let's give you some honest feedback. We had a company a few years ago that we did that. Their HR manager was leaving and they knew they wanted something different. And in fairness, the CEO, I think, just wanted to replace her. But we came in as, have a look at where you're actually at. And we gave them a very detailed report and sat down with the board and said, look, you've got issues here, 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 here. You've got something like 75 staff. And they were saying, we would like some leaders, please. And which is hilarious, going, people actually want more managers. They said, yeah, because we only have one. And this guy's trying to deal with all of these things and it doesn't work. So we kind of ran it as a 2-year project. So we took it right back to basics, did all the compliance stuff. But then we put in a layer of team leaders, which we trained up. Then we upskilled the more senior management and basically did a complete employee engagement piece, culture change piece, gave them structure, all the rest of it. And then after about 2 years, the CEO called us and said, what you've done is amazing, but I want a person that's sat here all the time. And I said, yeah, that's cool. Do you want us to help recruit them for you? And we literally did the recruitment, we selected the right person, and then we handed over and withdrew. Yeah, that's always good to do. But quite often we do a smaller bit where we just give them some feedback on what they need to do and can they carry on? Fine. If they want us to help, fine. Take it from there.
That's very clever. So you've obviously evolved and added that new service line from the HR compliance expertise type of thing to the leadership development. I alluded at the start about your business is evolving, you're evolving. What have you got planned, both in terms of operations and then perhaps even your role?
Yeah, well, we are at a little bit of a step change in the organisation. I mean, if I go back to the organisation's history, it was me. I was kind of a one-man band, if you like, trying to do everything at first. And I realised that I couldn't be everywhere. And if I was trying to do too much, I wouldn't be able to give the service I wanted. So I had a couple of freelance associates for a while. Then we started to employ. Now we've got up to, as I say, we're coming up to 9. Doesn't sound a lot, but obviously it's been a slow growth, and the growth period only really started just before lockdown. So we're just expanding maybe 1, maybe 2 a year at the moment. But I'm now changing across that I want to free myself up from working in the business. I've been doing that as a sort of ongoing piece of work for the last 2 years. We put a lot into setting the business up. We took a lot of risks. We've enjoyed every step of it. I want a little bit back out of it for me and the family now. So, yeah, the 2 main things we put in place is both myself and Yvonne, my wife, who's finance manager, who came kicking and screaming into the business years ago whilst trying to juggle the kids and everything. We now work 4 days a week. So we've got some longer weekends that we can get away and kind of enjoy our time together and as a family. But coming with that is a change in the structure. So I'm just about to appoint an internal appointment to operations director. And I put that out to everybody within the team to see who wanted to fly a flag on that. So we should be able to announce that in the next couple of weeks. That allows them to take over the line management of the entire rest of the team, but also take the HR side further forward in terms of services. Well, I'm actually concentrating more on bringing in new business for the overall growth, but also looking after the leadership development, the organisational development stuff. So again, looking for the clients that we can do maybe an audit or a piece of work like we did with Nasby de la Souche. I've say, right, we'll have the 2 things. We've got the HR process, compliance, all those packages running with some OD work, with some leadership stuff, with some general training for the teams. And then there'll be the stuff that we're looking at working with HR directors, HR managers in bigger organisations to share the skills of what leadership's all about, so they become more confident about leading the people that they've got. They know more about themselves because we're involved in psychometrics in it now as well, and letting them come out the other end actually going, wow, yeah, I now know what my company's vision is, because it's always been in there in my head rather than actually on a piece of paper. And no, maybe we never communicated it, and maybe we do go and talk to our people rather than ask our people what they think, and bring in all that involvement, which is this is what we find. Just going back to the HR side, just so you're aware, when we talk about the packages, we have three kind of, I wouldn't say off the shelf, but we've got three levels. One's a very, very accessible, because I'm saying accessible rather than cheap. The idea being it's for organisations up to about 5, so they become compliant with a suite of basic policies, which is what best practice says that they need. They still get the HR system. They can call us anytime they want, but there's no built-in. We don't do the hands-on stuff for them. And that tends to be organisations up to about 5, sometimes more. It's up to them. Then we do the one that I've talked about before, where we involve ourselves with everything, in terms of contracts, inductions, probation reviews, appraisal. And then the top one is that's where we actually bolt on. One of our guys will work on site once, maybe twice a month with them. We go through and make sure that we've done all the organisation development stuff. So we're bringing the organisation together. We're making sure we all know where we're going. For a performance management framework, that's all within it. So they know that they've got this plan for the next 2 or 3 years of how their business will go from there to there. And that's been really successful.
Yeah, that's smart. So that gives them the compliance, but it also is more proactive, and it gets them taking steps in the right direction to, improve the business in all sorts of ways. That middle tier, is that just one set pricing thing, or is it by hours or head count? How do you kind of structure that?
Yeah, we do it by head count. So there's a fixed amount at the bottom, which, because obviously we put the HRIS system in and we have to put all the compliance stuff in, but then we just add it per head. But we don't lock the people into long contracts. I don't really like that idea of people being locked into a 5 or 7 year contract that some of the big companies over here do. The longest one we do is 3 years, and that's for the big one. Because in fairness, after 3 years of doing all of those things in such a concentrated way, at that point, they're probably ready to say, okay, we can just revert back to what we're doing in the middle and move forward. So we kind of expect it to be like that.
So when I was asking about the marketing growth sort of things you worked on that's worked well, so you've mentioned networking. So you're a people business and people buy from people. So speaking at events, showing you're the expert contributor, making sure that you use the marketing mix such as Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And then ensure you have a really good website, keep it updated and invest in SEO. Anything sort of stands out for you, for your business, and advice to others?
It's a kind of evolving story. When I first started out, it was very much go to the opening of an envelope. If there was a networking group anywhere, I would go. So people got to know me, got to find out a little bit about me. Like I say, it's a people business. So am I likely to want to spend some money working with this guy? Let's see if he's any good. So that was a real concentrated thing for the first year. I was literally just doing that. I'd forgotten how to do HR by the time I had to start doing it again. And I've always continued that. I still go to 2 or 3 networking groups on a kind of fortnightly basis now. I kind of pick and choose the things I go to in terms of time now. I've never been a great fan of walking into the room where there's 250 other businesses, not because I'm bothered about going to a group 250. It's, are you going to find the right kind of person within that group that wants your services? Sometimes you end up having a conversation for 2 hours about someone's football team, which is rubbish for me because I don't know anything about football, but you don't get any further. And the same with exhibitions. At first, we used to do a lot of exhibitions, but in the cold light of day, and this is where what I suppose I'm saying is we've looked at return on investment. So I've looked back and said, yes, the networking was really good. The referrals from existing clients, they're brilliant. They're an absolute pat on the back. But the first thing we noticed that didn't give us a lot, which is probably surprising, is exhibitions.
Yeah.
Because people want to come along and blatantly take the mugs and the pens and all this kind of stuff. But I do remember having a conversation with the lady all about, she was having a terrible time with her employee issues, and I'm sort of going, okay. And then finally got a word in after about 25 minutes and said, so how many people do you employ? And she went, I wouldn't employ anybody. They'll just take too much of my time up. And I'd seen 2 guys behind her trying to get a word in edgeways, and I thought, They could have been my perfect client behind her, and she's just come for a moan, bless her. But yeah, I don't know whether it's because it's not something that people just rush into an exhibition and want to buy, because in all the years we've only had that once. It was the perfect piece of timing. But we did it mainly so that people would kind of go, oh yeah, I remember those guys. And we are a bit quirky, so at the end of lockdown, our thing was, right, we've not seen people properly for ages, so let's remind them who we are. So we did balloons and all the rest of it. But the good people of Bolton, of which I've got more clients in Bolton than anywhere else, have a thing for pasties. I'll let you try and explain what a pasty is to the American audience. But to the extent that, say, 2 miles away, I was like, really? So we ordered some of these pasties to be delivered at lunchtime. And when the pasty delivery dude turned up, it was like the sale on New Year's Day. They were literally climbing all over Steph trying to get at these pasties. And even now, 5 years later, people go, oh, I remember when you brought all those pasties. You think, is this what I'm known for? Just feeding people up? So we did pork pies at another one and just daft things. Yeah. Didn't win any clients, but people remember us for the pasties.
Right, okay. I know a business, their thing is they go around at Easter and they just hand deliver Easter eggs all over town and put a bottle of wine in it or something. It works like a charm and people remember them as the Easter egg company.
Yeah, our old brand, which we changed in 2019, featured a load of little yellow men. And that's another story about our marketing, which is probably worth a chat about. But anyway, we used to go and deliver these things, either look like gingerbread men or little, what do you call it, jelly babies. So we used to do that at Christmas and things like that. But yeah, the branding did have a hell of a difference to us from where we were to where we are now. And I'm going to give him a shout out because Paul Grogan from Think Design really grabbed me by the lapels and said, you need to do something about where you're seen. And he still does now. If I come up with a daft idea, he turns around and goes, no, that's just stupid. He tells me straight. But yeah, we started off, obviously, we had very little budget. We came up with this little design with these yellow men. And people knew these little yellow men. They were kind of stood in a pyramid. And they got christened Tweeple. And it came from a client, again, so I loved it. It was tiny, wee people. Anybody that knew anything, likes of Paul, this is just ridiculous because you're not being seen at the right level. And my second employee, Jen, I said, what do you think of the branding? And she said, they look like pictures of the gents' toilet door. You know, the little men's sign. I thought, oh, wow. So I started thinking, right, we are going to rebrand. And I stood back at one of our exhibitions. Rather than being stood on the stand, I stood away. So I was chatting to people and realised that the majority of visitors to our stand came up, told us these brilliant stories about the little yellow men and where they've hidden and what they've done with them, took a handful and left and gave them all to the kids and never bought any HR. They just wanted little stretchy rubber men. Then I went to a networking thing and I was doing the 10-minute spotlight. It was very, very bizarre. I was sat next to a coach who happened to have a similar background to me working in the police, so we kind of got something to chat about. And she said, can I give you some feedback? I said, feedback's the breakfast of champions, isn't it? Go for it. She said, I've just heard you talk about your business. What you do is brilliant. I can really see it. And because most of our groups, I end up with, there's about half a dozen people in the room going, we use People Matters for this, or we use People Matters HR for that. She said, so you're doing the right thing, you're saying the right thing, you look perfect with it. She said, but you're completely underselling yourself because all of your leaflets, all of your branding, everything is so cheap looking. And so, well, I kind of positioned it because the SME market can only afford it. She said, you need to push yourself more. And we were already in talks with Paul, and we had a complete revamp. Everything we went for, we still have it now. We have proper brochures with proper stories, decent pictures in there, case studies, and the website that you'll see today, peoplemattershr.co.uk. And it made such a difference so quickly that we were being seen with this new branding, get rid of the little yellow guys, decent pens, even the business cards went from being as the normal thing that you just buy to soft touch round corners. But because we've got proper brand guidelines, everything was on song and it stays like that. We never divert from it now. And Friday I was at something and one of the guys picked one of our pens up. He said, I love your pens because they're quality like you guys.
Nice.
And funnily enough, this is the reason I'm waffling on about this is this has been part of our step change. We've realised now that The vast majority of our business now is actually coming through the website because we've got professional brand guidelines, we've got professional SEO support, we've got all of those things. Literally, we're getting calls after calls after calls.
That's fantastic. People listening to this, though, getting the majority of the calls coming inbound to the website. That's the dream, but it's a flywheel involved. You've got to push that flywheel, get it started. And you did that when you started out solo, attending the opening of an envelope, going every talk you could find, exhibitions, meeting people constantly. So you did all the hard yards, got that flywheel turning, and now it's paying off. And you've stepped it up and improved that or increased the efficiency by working on that branding. And
I still do the other stuff, but in a slightly more targeted way. So we now, if we're going to go to a networking event, it tends to be with business owners. They might not necessarily be our clients, although everybody within any of my network groups have become our clients, which is amazing, but it's their contacts as well. For me, that's the bit I probably struggle with the most, is trying to get people to understand how helpful we can be to their contacts if they've not used us. So we still do the odd exhibition, so people know we're still around. I still network a couple of times a week, but I'm trying to look more to say I could do some presentations. We do a little bit of speaking, particularly at the moment with the new Labour government, not so much new anymore, came up with in their manifesto 67 proposals to radically change the way that we manage people in the UK, the employment reform bill, and it was real headline grabbing stuff. Fortunately, the 67 are now turned to 28. A lot of the things that people were worried about have gone to one side. But my kind of mini mission, and one of the reasons I'm sort of talking to people and going on and actually going and speaking, is to say, look, don't panic. People can panic you into making all sorts of decisions you don't need to make. At the moment, yes, there's some impact happening in April, which is really hitting all employers very hard in the pocket financially. But some of the longer term stuff may not happen till 2026, 27, it may not even happen. It's been diluted. So just telling people the truth and saying, look, don't make a decision without the full knowledge. If you're going to make that decision, come back and ask us. I'm not going to charge you anything if they say, what do you think? Because I'd rather people make the right decision now.
Are you having any change of tactic, strategy, whatever, when you're looking to go for more of the leadership type of work projects, which is different to a small SME needs headcount support for 5 whatever people? It's a different sort of game, and maybe they're not always connected. Any new approach for that, or what do you got in mind?
You're right, and it is something that, it's kind of my next step really of trying to figure that out, because oddly over the years, whenever we tried to do any direct targeted mail, emails, anything like that, it's never quite worked. And we've tried several times, and for some reason it doesn't really get any traction. I think you've got to actually talk to people. But we are looking, you're absolutely right, looking at organisations for the leadership stuff, of saying where you've got an organisation of maybe 100, 150 plus, and you've got 15 line managers, let's teach them. So we're currently having a look and kind of targeting businesses for the first time to actually say, we've seen what you do, it looks great. Have you thought of A, B, and C? Because what we've discovered is every time we've got a client of that size that we've gone to work with, they haven't, or they've thought about it but don't know how to. So it's kind of reinventing what we did at the beginning of saying you didn't know what to do about HR processes, you just knew you probably should. So we're just stepping up to that level, and I kind of try to be careful not to insult people and saying you don't know what you're doing, but have you ever thought of this and maybe we could help you out? So I've got a couple of those in the pipeline now. It is a different way of thinking, and it's a different way of working, and that's why I'm trying to give myself the time to sort of look at this and say, how are we going to market it, where are we going to market to, and what do I have to do to get in front of these people in the nicest possible way. So yeah, it's my step change at this point now. I've always liked to challenge, and this is my next bit, I think.
That's exciting. Do you have any advice for other HR business founders on how best to market or grow their business?
I think, as I've said, you learn from your mistakes. You need to make sure you give it a go. So if you think that you want to try it, it's worth it. But you've got to go in wholehearted. It's not a lifestyle choice. If I'm going to make this business grow one way or the other, I'm going to live it, breathe it, sleep it. Go and speak to people. Make sure people know who you are. Make sure you're the go-to person. Ask people what bothers them. Ask them what they'd like to do to try and fix the problem, or if they've not got a problem, how do they want to develop the business so it gets any better? Again, a lot of people get surprised when I talk about when we align performance. It's quite a simple thing of saying, make it simple, but here's your business goals, align your people to achieve the business goals, and then strangely enough, their performance gets better, and so does the organisation. It's not rocket science, but people don't tend to see this. And I see many appraisal systems that people use, and they sort of like, what are you into? Asking lots of questions, and then they leave it. We say, where's the bit where you say, this is what we're into, this is where we want to go, this is how we can develop you to help us. And by the way, we need to increase our sales revenue by X, particularly in the Polish market. You're our business development guy for Poland, therefore your target is such and such. You achieve that, we achieve that, everyone's happy. So yeah, just making people understand that we can help with all sorts of things. And this is where people see us, unfortunately, I think, in HR. It's like headmaster. You're going to get sent to HR. You're going to get dismissed. I just say that's just a small part of our job. It's not what I joined to do. Yes, it happens. But again, when it happens, somebody's put themselves in that position. I've not, and we treat them fairly all the way through. But HR can add so much value, and I think that's the thing that people need to articulate. I'll give you a quick example now. If you have somebody who's on national minimum wage, who's 21 years old, from the 1st of April, when you add in the pension contributions, when you add in the national insurance contributions that are going up to 15%, that minimum wage employee is going to cost you just under 30 grand a year. And people don't realise that because they see a price and they go, right, so what I say to people is, all right, so if you were going to spend 30 grand, would you just get it off the shelf? Would you buy it from Amazon? And a lot of people recruit like that. Yeah, my cousin needs a job. We'll bring my cousin in. Is your cousin meet the criteria? Does the person got the same drive? Does the person actually believe in what they're doing? So think about all of these people with a price on the head in the nicest way. You've got to get the most out of it. So if you kind of think financially with that and say, right, I've got this 30 grand investment, so I've got to train them right, make sure they do the right thing for the organisation, make sure they're the right kind of person, and get them to teach other people how good they are at things, and just harness the individuals you've got. And if you explain that to organisations, and if you get people thinking about that as an investment, and the adage is, well, I might train them and they might leave. And I would say, yeah, well, don't train them and they might stay. So it's just that mindset of how you talk to people, and you're not saying, yeah, we're here to sack everybody, because we're not. We just do.
No, I like the analogy of like a capital investment. If you bought a piece of machinery and first year up front is 30K, but if you're going to have that piece of machinery for 3 years and it has a few extras along the way, there's 100 grand. So you're going to invest in that, support that, and try and get the best out of that. And it'd be the same with that person. It's a great piece of advice. You've shared so much excellent advice, and I love the way, your story arc has evolved, and it's also got whole new chapters ahead of it, it sounds like. So it's really exciting. So congratulations, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
If people want to learn about you or the business, if they want to refer business in or become a client, something like that, what should they do next?
Yep. So go and have a look at our website, peoplemattershr.co.uk. You can have a look at all the services that we have in there. You can have a look at the leadership stuff. You can look at the compliance, you get the different packages. And there's some useful information, particularly if you're a Breathe HR user. We've got a load of videos in there about what to do with that kind of stuff. And a few little explainer videos from me and my guys about different things you will encounter as a people manager. If you want to talk to us, drop us an email, enquiries@peoplemattershr.co.uk. Always happy to have a chat to people. But yeah, if you're thinking about doing it, go for it. It's brilliant. Just make sure that you're all in and not partly. If you're doing it already, then good luck to you. Fantastic.
So if you're listening to this on the go, check out peoplemattershr.co.uk. Yeah, so check the show notes. You'll have the link to that and also to Niel's profile and so on. But do check out the website, because I know they've won awards recently, so congratulations on that. You'll also see about how they're expanding the team and the services and stuff. And
we've got 2 fairly big announcements to make in the next 2 weeks, but I'm not allowed to say.
Hold the press. All right.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. I'm sort of locked down on something that we've achieved, but yeah.
Well, there you go. If you're listening to this on the go check out what they were. If you're catching this in the future or if you're hearing this now, hang on tight. Check out the LinkedIn and follow the peoplemattershr.co.uk website. Niel, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best for you personally and for the business.
Thanks very much. It was a pleasure to talk.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks, and see you next time.